To wrap up the series on positional rankings in the NHL today, we tackle the Auston Matthews, the Connor McDavids, the Nathan MacKinnons of the world, the center position on today's edition of Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is Hunter Hodies, the host of Locked On Penguins. We want to thank everyone who's making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. So, Hunter, we're going to the big game. We are in the big game territory now. The center position, it has the most value of any position in the sport. We see the most predominant superstars in this league at that position. And as we've said, and I've qualified at the start of all of these positional power ranking shows, these rankings are subjective. These are our opinions. They are not a monolith. We are not even saying these are definitively right. We are saying this is how we feel about these. We're going to talk a little bit about what went into each of the guys as we go through. I hope you guys enjoy. And without further ado, Hunter, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I've been going back and forth on some of these guys in my top 10, but to start things off at number 10, I have Brayden Point. I mean, you look at the resume he has, Nick, with the Stanley Cups, but also he's just really fun to watch in all three zones. I mean, this past season, 46 goals, 90 points. He's been one of the top centers in the league for the last several years. I mean, there's had a couple years where he's been, at 48, 50, 60 points. But these last 2 years when he's been fully healthy, 95 points and 90 points respectively, 51 goals and 46 goals respectively as well. In the playoffs, he is also one of the most clutch players, I think, in the league. You look at his overall playoff stats in 87 games, 42 goals, 87 points. He was amazing for the Lightning during their back-to-back runs in 1920 and 2021. But even these last 3 years where the Lightning haven't won the Stanley Cup, he's still been at or around a point per game in the playoffs for the Lightning. He always shows up when they need him to. He's number 10 on my list. He has the potential, I think, to keep going up a little bit on this list, considering how good he's been, how good he still can be, and especially with the resume that he has.
I have Brayden Point at number 10 on my list as well. The thing I'm most curious to see about him and that Tampa team as a whole is how it continues to evolve going forward. Now that they're going to orient their team around him, Kucherov, and Gensel, and they've further moved away from that Stamkos, Hedman. Don't get me wrong, Hedman is still an upper echelon player, but the load's going to fall on those three guys. And Vasilevsky to see if he can bounce back from his injury recovery season. So with that in mind, Point is one of the preeminent playoff performers of this era. Him and Kucherov, a combined over 100 points in their two playoff runs in consecutive seasons. Kucherov over a point per game as well as Point, and consistently around the net front, undersized guy. People always, well, how did they figure it out? How did they know he was going to be good? What did they see that other people didn't? They were willing to take a chance on the guy. They saw a guy who had flawed skating in junior and said, we think we can work with this. He's a little undersized. But similarly to Zach Hyman, who's not a physically imposing guy, Point does a really good job of getting to that dangerous area around the net front in spite of his size. He takes a lot of hits and abuse because he's a smaller guy, but he manages to make plays around the net front, which is invaluable and something that you really can't teach. That hunger, that appetite to be around the net front. It's not for everybody. And the fact that Point, who isn't the most physically imposing guy, is a strong exhibitor of that trait, I'll be very curious to see. I imagine he'll be on the Four Nations team this upcoming year, and he'll have a good chance of being on the Olympic team 2 years from now for Team Canada. But this is one of the best players in the league and one of the best playoff performers in our league at the moment. Number 9 for you, sir.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. Number 9, I know you have this player a bit higher up on your list. I know this might be a hot take to some, but I have Elias Pettersson at number 9. This past season, another great one from him, 34 goals, 89 points in 80 games. After last season, where he had 102 points in 80 games. My biggest thing for him is, and I know it's a very small sample size, 13 games, but he just wasn't that good for the playoffs this year for the Canucks after being really good in the COVID-shortened season 1920. That year, in 17 games, he had 7 goals, 18 points. points, so over a point per game. This year, though, only 1 goal, 6 points in those 13 games. Just really wasn't good enough for the Canucks in both series against Nashville and against Edmonton. I feel like if Pettersson performed a little bit better in that series against Edmonton, the Canucks potentially would have won that series, considering the impact they got from Quinn Hughes, the impact they got from JT Miller, who is coming up in a little bit on my list. I just want him to perform maybe a little bit better in the playoffs overall. But, big center, he can score from anywhere on the ice, really good playmaker in his own right as well. I also really think he's come a long way with his defense as well, especially these last few years. So Pettersson for me, number 9 on my list, but I can easily see him rising, 2-3 spots by the end of the season if he has another really strong year.
You alluded to it. I have Pettersson a smidge higher on my list. Number 9 for me, Roope Hintz of the Dallas Stars. This is one of the preeminent transition players in our game today. And I know transition stats are a really weird thing to hyper focus on, but they're a really good indicator of future production and stability of production. And even as a rookie, even as a second-year player, it was very obvious that Hintz was going to start putting together the numbers he is now because the transition stats were there. When you are consistently able to carry the puck on your stick through the neutral zone with possession and allow your team to establish control in the offensive zone without having to go dump and chase it, you set yourself up so much better than teams that are reliant on that dump and chase game. This is one of those really strong amateur talent identification markers of the Stars saw this. They didn't quite slow play him along, but he wasn't exactly given a ton of opportunity out of the gate. The big question mark for Hintz and for a few players on this list is how healthy can he be? Because he has missed games consistently over the last handful of seasons. The counting stats don't jump off the page, 72 points, 75 points, 65 points, but this is somebody whose transition stats are elite. You can ride him with Robertson, and now you have a really nice 1-2 punch that's set up for the long term with Wyatt Johnston. If he puts up a year like he just had next upcoming season, he's going to be a strong candidate for this list next year. And you have him and Hintz down the middle. You still have Tyler Seguin for one more year. That's a really good 1-2-3 down the middle in Dallas. And Hintz, I'm very excited to see what this next permutation of the Stars looks like with him, with Johnston, with Jason Robertson, who we both pumped up a lot last week on the Wingers episode. So Hintz is a great player. I love his game. The Stars are one of the most fun teams in the league to watch, and he's one of the big reasons.
Yeah, his defensive metrics are also really good as well. I was going back and forth with him and Brayden Point and someone also like Miller and Pettersson for the bottom of my list, but I have Hintz just a little outside. Probably if I had to rank him right now, I'd probably put him number 11. That's just, again, my opinion. Number 8 for my list, though, I have JT Miller. I'm a massive JT Miller fan, especially these last several years with the Canucks. I mean, Nick, with the Rangers, he was fine, 40 to 50 point guy with the Rangers, goes to Tampa Bay, plays fine, but then he goes to the Canucks and he's just become a completely different player these last 4 to 5 years. I mean, you look at these last 3 years in general, 21-22 counting stats wise, 32 goals, 99 points. Next year, 32 goals, 82 points. And then this year, a career high in goals with 37 and a career high in points with 103 in 81 games. He was also tremendous for the Canucks in the playoffs, 3 goals, 12 points in 13 games. One of the biggest reasons why they got to the second round. It's just the way that he is just, what's the word I'm looking for? I think his glow up, these last 3 to 4 years has been something to behold. His skating, I feel like, has gotten better. His offensive instincts have gotten better. Yeah, part of it is playing with top tier talent and playing in a bit of a higher role here with Vancouver than he did with the Rangers. But he just looks like a completely different player. His underlines are very strong. I have Miller above Pettersson right now. I could easily, see that changing after this season. But I'm a big Miller fan, and just the way that he played on a nightly basis this season, and especially in the playoffs, has him number 8 on my list.
Miller's got some real ruggedness to his game. Yeah. He's got a real, I'm going to make this happen, and if I die trying to do it, I'm going to do it. He really got
a lot of like that physical element to the game as well. He's not afraid to throw the body around. He can be a bit of a rat as well. He's just a lot of fun to watch. Again, number 8 on my list.
Miller's really dynamic, and he's somebody that a lot of people have talked about how he himself has said that it took 2 different teams saying, hey, man, you got to get it together or you're never going to be as good as you should be. And it took 3 tries, for Tampa Bay, who gave him that 5-year contract, the 5x5, as soon as he got there from being traded by the Rangers 1 year into it to say, yeah, this doesn't work for us. That's a real stinging indictment, considering Tampa Bay went on to win the next 2 Stanley Cups. Real quick, I'll get in my number 10, 9. I'll get in my number 8, Sidney Crosby. You can make an argument for him a few spots higher. I think Sid is still consistently one of the best players in the world. His two-way game has really evolved as he's gotten older. He, as you and I often say, he's the best grinder in the entire sport. He uses his positioning and his leverage, his body shape, his leverage to outwork other guys, even though he's not the most physically imposing. His backhand is still lethal from anywhere on the ice. He's still a preeminent playmaker. And at this point, it's really just a matter of how many stats can he accumulate? Can the Penguins get him back to the playoffs one more time? And how long does he want to keep playing? This is one of the best players we're ever going to see. And watching this stage of his career where he's reinvented his game, for probably, I would say, a third time, that's the sign of a true great. Everyone talks about it with LeBron, where original Cleveland, straight up slasher, then he adds more of a mid-range when he gets to Miami. And now he's kind of more of just a playmaker. Sid's done the same thing where he came in, he was explosive, dynamic, high-flying both directions, lots of goals, lots of assists. Then he shifted more of a playmaking role. And now, as we've said a few times, he's an elite net front player. He's great in the corners, and he's a great distributor. And he's really good defensively now, too. I know there's a budding consensus amongst the old head hockey writers. How do we get Sid top 3 in the Hart Trophy voting one last time? This is the type of year. The Penguins sneak in as the second wild card, and Sid goes for 90 points with good defense. He could be third in the Hart Trophy voting. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll keep making our way through our list, so be sure to stick around. Summer is winding down. Only a few weeks left till seasonal summer ends, even though it's already September. If you're like me, you're trying to squeeze in every last bit of fun you can, whether it's concerts, whether it's baseball. And the only place I buy tickets to go to shows, to go to games, using the Gametime app, featuring features like all-in pricing, where you toggle the settings on up front. There are no surprise fees at checkouts. The seat views. If you're like me, you're going to a baseball game, you want to be able to see balls and strikes. You get a view from your seat in the app before you buy. The lowest price guarantee, or Gametime, will credit you 110% of the difference. And Gametime ticket coverage, where your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So if you want to get in on the end of summer, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Locked On Fantasy Football provides you a national perspective on fantasy football to get you ready for each and every week, with national experts and local insights on every player in the league. Available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hunter, the floor is yours.
Number 7 on my list, I have Jack Hughes. The biggest thing for me is his health. If he stays healthy, he's one of the best players in the world. I mean, I could watch him skate virtually every night if I could. I mean, the way that he's able to rev it up with the puck on his stick is something to behold. I mean, it really is breathtaking when you watch it live. I mean, his 22-23 season is a taste of what he can do when he's fully healthy. 99 points was great in the playoffs, especially against the Rangers. If he's able to stay healthy this year, I definitely think the Devils get back to the playoffs. I really like their forward group when healthy. Defensively, they'll have Dougie Hamilton back, then obviously in goal. Hopefully they'll be better. But for Hughes, again, he is I think when healthy, the engine that makes that Devils team go. When he's banged up, they're just not the same team. I mean, I'm not, saying breaking news or anything right now, but Hughes is just a joy to watch. Great offensive instincts. And yeah, number 7 on my list.
I love Hughes. I have him coming up briefly. I have Elias Pettersson at number 7 for me, with the logic being, and I hear you and I agree with you that he wasn't great in the postseason. And the argument for Pettersson being this high is his dynamic ability, that when he is locked in, he can be right there on the fringes of that MacKinnon Matthews conversation. When he is playing at his best, he's a smidge below those guys. This is a dynamic playmaker, an absolute missile of a shot where if he tees it up from distance, good luck, just genuinely good luck. And the Canucks, when that power play is humming, when you got him, you got Miller, you got Besser, all with Quinn Hughes running the point, that group is insane, and Pettersson is one of the best playmakers in the game, and his shot is above average to boot on top of that. But I agree with you. You would like a little bit more in the postseason. You would like him to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of taking the net front, driving the net, forcing the other team to play defense, as opposed to maybe lingering around the perimeter, which he can be guilty of at times. But with that shot and his passing ability, I understand why he falls back on that. Back to you, sir.
Number 6 on my list, I got Sasha Barkov, the best two-way center in the NHL today. And the thing is, he's been this good for a very long time, but the only reason he doesn't have more Selkies is because Patrice Bergeron was winning the award every year as the best two-way center in the league. But Barkov, his two-way numbers were on par with Bergeron's, but Bergeron was just, again, that freaking good. But Barkov, he's been doing this for a long time. He has a knack for shutting down the best players in the NHL, especially in the playoffs. We saw that during the Stanley Cup playoffs this year, especially in the first 3 rounds. In a little bit in the Stanley Cup final until McDavid and Draisaitl kind of started having their way, especially in the final 3+ games of the series. But I think with Barkov, just, again, the way that he's able to shut down high-end talent and how he basically gives them nothing when they're on the ice. And again, at times you're McDavid or Draisaitl, you're going to get yours at least a little bit. But in terms of some of the other players in the playoffs that he was able to shut down, the way that he was able to really give them nothing while controlling the ice when he was out there, it's a lot of fun to watch. And I definitely think, at least for me, he's still one of the more underrated players in the NHL, if that makes sense. I still feel like some people don't realize how great Barkov is in all 3 zones. Offensively, he's also a really sound playmaker, has, I think, an above average shot, in my opinion, as well. So Barkov, number 6 on my list. He has the potential to get into the top 5 next year, though.
People are going to be annoyed where I have Barkov, how high I have him placed on my list, but coming off of the playoffs he just had, I kind of felt obligated. Number 6 for me, I have Jack Hughes. At this point, as you said, he's just got to stay healthy. I've seen it. The vision was very clear. I think anybody who has watched Jack Hughes consistently, you see this is the 2nd or 3rd best skater in the entire sport. He is a preeminent playmaker. He consistently puts the other team on its heels. He has maybe the fastest straight line burst of any player in the entire league. His edge work, his ability to change direction is sublime. And if he stays healthy, the Devils are a terrifying team. There's no other way to put it. You look at how the Devils just systemically started to dissect the Rangers in that series 2 years ago, where people forget the Devils were losing that series 2-0. That game 3 was 1-1 going into overtime, and the Devils won 2-1 in overtime. The Devils, after that game, slowly started to pick the Rangers apart, getting pucks in deep, skating just straight past guys at times, which Hughes does. You heard Shesterkin say it. Who's the hardest player in the league to stop? It's Jack Hughes. Who's the player you least like trying to stop? Because he gets that head of steam. He goes around your defenseman, and he's one-on-one with you, and he's beating Shesterkin with that 5-hole soft tuck that Kucherov used to do, where you barely put anything on it, and the goalie just starts to move, assuming they're going to go top shelf, and you're 5 holes wide open, and Hughes has got that in his bag, and it makes him, I don't want to say unstoppable, but pretty close.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you on that. And speaking of Shesterkin, Nick, I believe he said the same thing about the next player on my list as well, and that is Sidney Crosby. He gave some pretty glowing compliments about Sid when he's going in full gear. Despite being 37, I still feel like Crosby is a top 5 center in the league. Yeah, I know I'm one of the co-hosts of the Locked On Penguins podcast, and I get to watch Sidney Crosby on a nightly basis. Trust me, people, he is still very elite as a player. He makes a lot of players look silly. Every game, he's put up nearly 100 points last season at age 36. He would have been over 100 points if the Penguins' power play was just average. The fact that he still had 94 points despite the Penguins' power play being one of the worst units in the league goes to show how great he was at 5-on-5. He's kind of aging like LeBron James did a little bit in the NBA. As you pointed out, Nick, when you put him at number 8, best grinder in the league, the way that he's been able to fine-tune his game to work on his two-way game a little bit over these last few years. I do think people overrate Sid's two-way game a little bit. It's not on the level of Barkov or some of these other great two-way centers, but I still feel like it's at least pretty good. It's better than where it used to be early in his career. But the way that Crosby is able to outthink so many opponents on the ice, it's kind of the little things that really just stand out to me. The little things he does with the puck on his stick, the way that he's able to outsmart you, especially behind the net. That's his office, man. The way that he's able to set up plays behind there, the way how great he is in front of the net. You already mentioned his backhand, one of the best backhands in the league.
Ever.
Yeah,
one of the best
100%.
backhands ever.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. One of the best backhands in the league, if not ever. And just the way that he's been able to be so consistent throughout his career goes to show that, again, he's one of the 5 best players, in my opinion, at least in the history of the sport. You can make an argument for top 4 if you want. I have him at number 5 right now, but until he slows down, I'm not going to predict him to do that. But Sid, number 5 on my list. I know I have him a bit higher than you do, but he's just still that dude.
Real quick, one word answer. Who's the second best two-way center in hockey behind Barkov?
Second best.
That's more than one word. That's more than just the player, Hunter.
Yeah. I'm having trouble, honestly.
I think it's Heischer. If Heischer's healthy, I think it's Heischer. But we're going to take.
He was always in the Selke conversations as well. Back when he was in his prime, I would say like behind Bergeron, I would say someone like Ryan O'Reilly because he was great, but not anymore.
That's fair. All right, we got one more quick break to take. We're going to wrap up today's show. Be right back. Next up on my list, and this might surprise people, I have him this low. I have Draisaitl here. I like Leon's game a lot. I love one of my favorite players, one of the best goal scorers, one of the best playmakers, one of the best playoff performers of recent memory. You know, you think about how dominant he was in that series against the Kings 2 years ago on one leg where he could not move laterally, but he parked himself in that one spot on the power play and at 5-on-5 and said, find me and we'll score. And when he's on, good luck. It's that straightforward. This is one of the best players in the world. I'm really excited to see how they deploy the configuration of wingers they have at his disposal now, whether they're going to get Nuge on the wing, they could use Hyman down there. They have Skinner, they have Arvidsson. If Savoie gets a look, if and when Evander Kane eventually comes back, this is the most opportunities that anyone that Draisaitl's had to play with somebody other than McDavid. You know, last year was the first time in their respective careers they weren't each other's most common line mates over the course of an entire season. So if you have those two guys fully separated from each other, you can control almost half of the game with just those two guys on the ice. But Leon's defense does leave a bit to be desired, and it's why based on your context clues, you'll figure out who I have one spot ahead of him. Back to you, sir.
Right, Nick. I mean, and that's what the Penguins were doing when Crosby and Malkin were in their primes. They were controlling half the game, basically, just because of how great they were in their primes. I mean, they still are great players in their own right, not as good as they used to be, but they had that luxury. And obviously, you know, Edmonton, I think, is going to have that moving forward here. I have Draisaitl number 4 on my list. One of the most clutch players in the league right now, coming off 3 straight 100-point seasons. He was money in the playoffs, scoring 31 points in 25 games. The playoff stuff, that's, I think, one of the biggest reasons why I have him this high is because the Oilers can always count on him for something in the playoffs. You brought up how he was basically playing on one leg against the Kings. Heck, he looked a bit banged up during the playoffs this year at times too, Nick. Didn't really seem to matter. I mean, he was just that good for the Oilers in the playoffs. And, you know, he's mint on the power play, especially on the right side. He's great at 5-on-5. He's just a ton of fun to watch. As you said, his defense leaves a little bit to be desired, but I still think he's one of the 5 best players in the world right now. And I have him number 4. I think he can definitely move up maybe a little bit on this list by the end of next season, but I think number 4 for him right now, considering who I have in the top 3, and I think people can probably guess who those 3 players are. I think 4 for him right now is a pretty good spot.
Draisaitl's incredible, but based on how the playoffs just went, I have to put Barkov ahead of him. Based on the way the playoffs just went, I know that's very reductionist, like 1 versus 1, but based on the way Barkov was in those playoffs where he was consistently the best guy on the ice every time he was out there, and the counting stats will never be what Leon's, what Connor's, what any of the guys counting stats-wise are ahead of him. But this is the best two-way player in the sport right now. I feel that if I have this guy on my team, he's going to do whatever he can, and the other team's best guy's not making something happen. And he's going to win as many Selkies as he wants, basically, unless we get to a voter fatigue situation, which probably won't happen because it's the Selke as opposed to the MVP, but I love Barkov's game. I think there was this one video I remember watching during the playoffs where after one of the games against the Rangers, somebody did a breakdown on TikTok where instead of using his stick blade, Barkov was using the blade of his skates to redirect passes on the power play just to mess with defenders because he could. Because everyone's looking at his stick waiting to see how he's going to move the puck. But instead, if he just angles his foot, he can kick it with just enough force to keep it moving. You know, that level of intuition, those instincts, that is what being the best two-way player in the world is being that dexterous where you can make anything happen. All you need is one hand on your stick or one skate blade on the ice.
Barkov's awesome, man. I mean, again, you know, by far the best two-way center in the league right now. Number 3 on my list, I'm going Auston Matthews. Yeah, I understand he doesn't have some of the playoff success that some of these other guys have, but I mean, for God's sakes, people, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. They haven't had a lot of playoff success these last 20 years overall. But Matthews, he is a treat to watch. I mean, he's coming off a 69 goal, nice, by the way, 107-point season this past year. The best pure goal scorer in the NHL right now. I mean, he's had 60-plus goals in 2 of his last 3 seasons. He has the best pure release in the league as well. He knows where to go to score goals, whether it's in front of the net, it's, 15, 20 feet out. He uses that release to his advantage every single time. He's also a bit of a big body. He can lay the boom at times as well. But when it comes to just what a pure goal scorer looks like, that is what it is with Auston Matthews. And we discussed this a little bit over the offseason, Nick. I think with Matthews, he will have a good opportunity to catch Ovechkin.
Yes.
He continues this type of production up for the next several years. Considering what Matthews has already done in the league, he keeps this up, he might pass Ovechkin once I think Ovi passes Gretzky. That's just how good of a goal scorer Matthews already is. I can't wait to see how he does in the Four Nations face-off and the Olympics. I think he's going to play really well for Team USA in both of those events. Again, one thing that I really want from him is more playoff success, but we got to have the Leafs do that maybe a little bit more as a team. But Matthews, number 3 for me.
And he did it kind of banged up, towards the end of the season. He wasn't playing. He wasn't healthy. He had the wrist thing bothering him. He wasn't in all of their first round games against the Bruins this year. But yeah, Matthews is incredible. He's who I have at number 3 as well. The defense is there. On top of being a 70-goal guy, he's got good defensive impacts. He can drive his own line. He's got a good enough skate stride that even though he's not a burner, he gets where he needs to be. And his release, it's from anywhere. He can pull up from anywhere and it's liable to go on net. And you think about how far we are removed from him getting taken first overall that first game where he had a hat trick in his NHL debut. And he's only gotten better. That's one of the things about Matthews that I really wanted to point out is he's only gotten better as he's gotten older. And I know you're supposed to, as you mature, get into your prime, but to have the defense in your bag where you're not like Draisaitl, to be the best pure goal scorer in the sport without being the most physically gifted player aside from his release, it's remarkable. And this is one of the best players in the world. And as you said, you want to see the team success because guys like this, guys like McDavid, you want to see them get their recognition. And it's really hard in hockey for a superstar to get their recognition if they don't have that team success to accompany it.
No, I 100% agree with you. And speaking of team success, number 2 on my list, Nathan MacKinnon. I mean, he is an absolute joy to watch on the ice. When he comes full steam ahead, good luck to anyone that basically is trying to stop him. I think when I look at the overall skaters in the NHL right now, he's the second best skater in the league. I would only put Connor McDavid over him. I would have Jack Hughes a smidge behind MacKinnon. Those are
different types of skating stride. Different types of skating stride. Yeah. McKinnon's is a bit more explosive where it kind of feels like a running back gearing up to hit their stride into the open field. Whereas Hughes, it's more about the edge work and the deceptiveness and the shiftiness.
Right. I think the way MacKinnon just revs it up is something to behold. Again, that's why I think just puts it a little over the top for me, for him being the second best skater in the league. And also, Nick, you look at his first few seasons, he was only around a 50 to 60 point player after his first 4 seasons in the league. After that is when he really just took off, 97-point season, 99-point season. This past year, he's only gotten better despite being 29 years old, 51 goals, 140 points in 82 games, by far the best season of his career. He can do it all, 5-on-5, power play. His defensive metrics, I think, are at least okay in the NHL right now. But just the way that he's been able to get even better as a playmaker over the years, despite, only being 29, it's a joy to watch. And I could watch him on the power play any night as well. But just the skating combined with his playmaking ability and his shot, number 2 on this list for me.
The one anecdote I'll tell, because we're running long on time, I think about MacKinnon in the stadium series, the Lake Tahoe. There we go. It took 3 tries. The Lake Tahoe game that restarted at midnight because the NHL forgot about the sun. I think about Pietrangelo looking up and seeing MacKinnon about to go full stride and just saying, oh boy. Like Alex Pietrangelo, one of the best players of his era, one of the best defensemen in the league, looks up and says, well, I'm out of luck because this guy's about to go around me. There's nothing more you can say about a guy than if his peers are genuinely like, there's nothing I can do, especially the good ones. That's a testament to just how good he is. He's one of the best in the world. He got that cup. He finally got his MVP as well. He's the highest paid player in the league the last 2 years. Draisaitl will pass him next year once that contract kicks in. This is what it looks like, man. When you pick first overall, you want an Auston Matthews, a Nathan MacKinnon, a Connor McDavid, a Jack Eichel. I know Eichel was second overall, but you get what I'm saying here. You want one of those types of guys who just, when the chips are down, they're going to do something that even their peers are like, damn, we can't do anything about this.
And speaking of what it looks like, that's what it is for Connor McDavid, man. Yep. Number 1 center on both of our lists. Sorry for speaking for you, but I know he's number 1 on your list. Yeah. I mean, what else is there to say about him? Best player in the world. He can take over the game in an instant. And also the sheer combination of his speed, stick handling, and his release are also not fair. The amount of times I've seen him go, whether it's 1-on-2, 1-on-3, 1-on-4, even so many times throughout his career, it's too many to count. But you have players looking at him after like, how in the heck did you just do that? But again, that's what it looks like. He's lived up to the hype and then some. The only thing that's really eluded him at this point in his career is not having a Stanley Cup. I hope that he's able to get one at some point during his career. He has basically everything else at this point in his career. The only thing that's again eluding him is just the Stanley Cup. But best player in the world, he's going to go down as one of the best players to ever do it. That's really all I have on McDavid. Do you have anything else to add on Connor for yours?
3-time Hart Trophy, 5-time Art Ross, 4-time Players MVP, 7-time All-Star. He won the Conn Smythe on a losing team, which hasn't happened in like 15 years. This is the best we're probably ever going to see.
Longer than that, Nick. I believe it's 20 years.
It's something like that.
Yes.
The Jaguar one was the last guy.
2003, I believe.
Yeah, it's been a lot. That shows to go how long ago it was. In my head, I was like, it's only like 10, 15 years ago. No, McDavid is the best hockey player I've ever seen. If you're listening to this episode and you haven't gotten the chance to see McDavid play in person, the tickets will be expensive. Go. You will get awed. It looks so much different than everybody else when he has the puck on his stick. And that's the way, and this is the most reductionist, simplistic way you can explain hockey to people to differentiate between who's good and who isn't. Look how easy they make it look. McDavid makes looking like the best player in the world look easy. He makes it look like, oh yeah, of course, I'm going to bob and weave through all 5 of these guys. That goal he scored against the Rangers, That's in all of the commercials. He just went through 4 guys and said, okay, I got this. And yeah, the only guy in the world who can do that. McDavid is a treat. He's the best player in the world. If he gets that cup, he's going to be in that conversation 10 years from now of who you got, him or Gretzky. That'll eventually be the Jordan versus LeBron argument. He gets a cup or 2. We're going to start having that type of discourse in the hockey sphere. McDavid probably not going to catch Gretzky on the counting stats just because Gretzky scored so many points. But era dependent, this is the best you're ever going to see.
I do have a question for you. Do you think all time does he pass Crosby on the list, all time list for like best players ever?
It depends on the accolades. I think talent wise, yes. I think Sid's got the better resume. Yeah. I think this is the Brady versus Mahomes. Crosby has all the Brady accolades. He's undoubtedly one of the most talented guys to ever do it. Mahomes is more explosive. He's got more counting stats. McDavid starts getting some trophies like Mahomes does, then we're going to have that discussion as well. But he's right there. He's already right there. If McDavid retired tomorrow and just said, I don't really want to play hockey anymore, first ballot Hall of Famer, not a doubt in my mind. This is the best I have ever seen. And I can't wait, man. This Oilers team on a mission, last dance with everybody on reasonable contracts. It's going to be fascinating to watch. That'll do it for this week's edition of Locked On NHL. Next week, we will start making our way through each individual division, power ranking our expectations for them ahead of the upcoming 2024-2025 NHL season. If you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you are watching over on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the alarm bell. Leave us a comment. Let us know your top 5, 10, however many centers you want to leave us. If you want to flame me for putting Barkov ahead of Draisaitl as the host of Lockdown Oilers, please let me know. We'll talk to you guys next week. Till then.